then the prosecutor goes and he gives his, at first he's like, he's burying me. He's talking about how bad I am because I got trade lines and I'm not listening and I don't acknowledge my restitution. Meanwhile, I've never missed a payment. I shouldn't have any trade lines because I owe the government restitution. But then he says, but Mr. Teachout has a great career. He's got a family. It's not our office's intent to put somebody into prison that's not a threat to society, and we don't see Mr. Teachout as that. We would just, like to see some more supervision to make sure that he's doing okay. And then the judge basically says, yeah, that's great, but I'm going to take that 18 months and I'm going to give him 90 days incarceration.
A lot of people don't understand the complications associated with mass incarceration. That's why I wanted to present this story of Matt. He served a sentence for 4 years or something along those lines, served his sentence well, got out of prison, starts doing well, gets a job, puts his family together. But there are complications of being on supervised release that a lot of people don't really understand. One of those complications may be a rule that you cannot fill out a credit application without getting permission from your probation officer. Well, after some personal challenges, Matt made the decision to fill out a credit card report. As a result of him filling out a credit card report without getting permission from his probation officer, he got what's termed violated on supervised release. He had a 36-month sentence to serve. While he was in his 35th month, the probation officer requested his credit report, and when she saw that he had filled out a credit application, she made the decision to violate him. And her recommendation was that he would serve another 18 months on supervised release. And he's going to serve those new 18 months on supervised release, but he's also going back to prison. These are the complications of mass incarceration. Because during this era of COVID-19, during this era of massive unemployment, during this era where people with felony convictions have a hard enough time getting employment, the judge who sentenced Matt thought that it would be a good deal, a good idea to send him back to prison for 90 days just to disrupt his life further. Not for new criminal activity, but because he filled out a credit application.
So I'm Michael with Prison Professors, and I like to provide as much content as I can that will help people really understand the challenges that befall anybody who's faced a criminal charge. And I received an email from this young man right here. Aaron, how you doing?
Good. How you doing?
I'm doing well. He asked me some questions just out of the blue about supervised release, and I told him that part of the work that we do is we try to help other people understand what's going on and what they can do better. And so I asked him, would you mind if I recorded this call so that I could use it to teach and inspire other people? And he said, cool. So that's the nature of this call. And you're going to hear about this just as I'm hearing it. I told Aaron that he could ask me anything he wanted, and I would give him the insight of my experience and respond to any questions that he have, including probably even sharing my screen to show him how to do things. So Aaron, I appreciate you being so open and willing to talk with us. Why don't you're facing right now a violation of supervised release. Tell us first of all, what brought you into the prison system in the first place?
So in 2012, I was charged with conspiracy to commit bank fraud, which was a mortgage fraud case from 05 to 07 back in the mortgage days. Mm-hmm. I was 23 to 25 and had to do with house flipping and whatnot. So anyway, I got 51 months. Served 40 in and then 4 months home confinement / halfway house.
Where'd you serve the time?
I did 10 months in Terre Haute, Indiana, and then I did 23 in Duluth, Minnesota, and then the last 8 or 9 was in Edgefield, South Carolina.
All in minimum security camps, I presume.
Yep.
And why is it that they transferred you those 3 times? Was it for the RDAP program or something?
Nope. So the first time Terre Haute was overcrowded, so they sent 60 of us to Duluth. And then I was releasing to North Carolina, so I put in a request to be transferred, and they granted it.
So were you pleased to get the transfer from Terre Haute to Duluth?
No, definitely not.
You had no knowledge of it, and it just disrupted your life and moved you out.
Yeah, it took me from 4 hours from family to 13.
With no prior notification, or how much prior notification?
They The only reason was it kind of got out through the counselors and whatnot that we knew, but other than that, it was about a 2-day notice.
So that's an important data point for anybody that's facing challenges with the Bureau of Prisons. Sometimes things happen that you have no control over or no knowledge of, and you've just got to kind of roll with it. How was your adjustment when you got to Duluth?
So it was it was late January of 2014. In the prison bus, you get a T-shirt and some very thin pants and some sandals. And when we arrived in Duluth, Minnesota, it was -48. You couldn't tell there was any trees because the snow was so high. So it was a different, obviously, if you weren't in the north, it wouldn't be as big a deal, but it was awfully cold. But it was getting used to not getting the visit every other week, adjusting to that. Everything in Terre Haute is under one roof versus Duluth, you have to walk to everything. So when it got that cold, they'd shut the camp down for a week or two and you couldn't get to the phone or the email to communicate with anybody. So just a little bit of adapting, but you figure it out.
But you did adapt and you made it through the journey, and you were eventually able to get to a little bit closer to home, back to, where did you say you went? Edgefield?
So in the meantime, my family had moved to North Carolina from Michigan. And so I put in for a transfer and they sent me to Edgefield, South Carolina, which was about 3 hours from home. So the last 8-9 months was pretty good.
So serving time at the three places, why don't you give our audience a little bit of a rating between Terre Haute, Duluth, and the Edgefield?
Edgefield. Okay. So Terre Haute is
pluses and minuses.
Okay. So Terre Haute is in southern Indiana. Very laid back. There's a penitentiary and a medium there. So the focus on the camp is slim to none. So there's about 400, when I was there, there's about 450 inmates, and there's usually only one CO on the grounds. So it's pretty laid back. There's, a track, a weight pit, a basketball court. There's but it's very dirty. It's old. It's run down. It's dirty. There's no air conditioning. So the summer was very hot, but
recap then is pretty simple. Pluses, very little supervision or intrusion from guards, a lot of liberty. Downside, kind of dirty.
Yes.
How about Duluth?
Duluth it's a standalone camp, about 1,000 inmates. There's a lot to do there. It's a very big camp. It's huge as far as open area and things to do. There's a lot to do to stay busy, but they run it definitely more strict than Terre Haute, however you want to say it. So it's the pluses are there's a lot to do. You can stay busy. It's open, a lot going on, but it's they run it definitely more strict.
And also the negative is the weather can get pretty cold and
yes,
it closes down.
You get about 3-4 months a year where you can enjoy it. And other than that, it is very, very cold.
Edgefield.
So that's attached to a medium facility. It was the only camp I was at that had a barbed wire fence all the way around it. There's not very much to do there. There's no weights. There's only an outside basketball area and a track. So not a lot to do there. The weather's okay. It's hot in the summer. There was a few days we couldn't go outside due to the heat. But overall, not terrible. Air conditioning, good stuff. But that was the least of the three. That was the least that there was to do, and probably the strictest that it was governed, I guess you could say, or policed. Supervision.
So good takeaways there from our friend Aaron is that you've got to be self-directed if you're going in there. You've got to know how to make your own time and stay busy, whether it's push-ups or pull-ups or dips.
Yes.
You don't wait for the prison system to make your life. You make it on your own. And so you got out. What year did you get out?
I got out of the prison September 15th of 16, and then I was released from the BOP January 10th of 17.
Does that mean you had 4 months of home confinement / halfway house?
Correct.
Okay. And so you're in society in 2017, January?
Yep. So, January 10th was my release date.
And we're recording this video in June of 2020. So how much supervised release did you have?
3 years.
36 months. And how was the 36 months?
So I went through 4 different probation officers. My first one was extremely strict, by the book, but she was brand new. This was like her first caseload. So she was new, by the book, but I only had her for 1 month. And then I got switched to a guy that was a year from retirement. And he basically said, just stay out of the way and don't get in trouble. And I don't really care. And then I got
And that means that all you had to do was submit your financial report once a month?
Yeah, I had to go online reporting. You go on once a month, you log in, you fill out the 10 questions they got, yes, no, etc., and stay out of the way, basically. Don't get another case, don't get in trouble. If you have contact with the police, let me know.
Okay. And so all was cool for how long?
35 of the 36 months.
So you were 1 month away from completing your thing and thinking it's all good. May I ask why you didn't? Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I was going to say, so along the way, when I first started, the very first lady, I just got on probation. I asked her about getting a vehicle. Now I'm on a white collar case, so it's probably a little bit different than somebody that may be on a drug case or something else other than a white collar case. But she was very hard on me about getting a vehicle. And I basically had to have my employer she didn't want me to have a vehicle. She didn't want me to get any, because part of which a lot of people don't realize, if you're on a white collar case, part of your supervision is you cannot open any trade lines without approval from your probation officer.
And explain to them what a trade line is.
Any type of credit. So any bank loan, credit card, anything that's going to affect your credit or a loan or a debt in your name would be considered a trade line. So she didn't want me to basically have a car, which I don't know how some people, if they didn't have an employer that would help them, I don't know how they would function to get to work. But I ended up getting a vehicle. Then it got easier as it went. And then I actually submitted at 2.5 years. In the meantime, at about 1 year into my supervised release, I got full custody of my son. And so he was living with me full time. He was about to turn 16, which he did a year later. So I'm 2 years in. I requested at almost 2.5 years to be off of supervised release early. I had no violations, no problems, no nothing. My probation officer wrote a report to the judge stating that I had done everything right and she had no problem with it. The U.S. attorney had no objection to it. And my judge still said no and said good behavior is not a reason to get off early, finish your time, and blah, blah. Well, this time I now needed a car for my son. My son's also about to graduate. So I broke the rules. I went and got a second vehicle, and I opened a couple of credit cards in my name, small. One was $1,000, one was $2,500, to establish credit, knowing that he's about to go to school, student loans, all these things. And when I was 3 weeks from being done, she went and pulled my credit report, which was probably on the checklist of things to do before they let me off, and obviously saw that I had these loans on my credit. So she violated me.
Well, wait a minute. Nobody's going to know what that means. So okay. You got the credit. You said you knowingly got the credit, and you knew that you weren't allowed to get the credit.
Yeah, I went and I applied for it. Got 2 credit cards. Got a car loan.
When you were applying for it, did you have any queasiness in your stomach? If they ever find out about this, or you just thought it was not that big? For sure,
I was. Well, I'll be honest. When I did it, I had, after struggling to be able to even get a car supposedly in my name to be able to go to work when I first got out of prison, and then to apply early, have everybody tell me it was okay, and the judge to kind of throw it in my face, I kind of had this bitterness again. Like, how long do I got to pay for what I've done? I've done everything right that you've wanted for the last 7 years, plus a year of pretrial. So 8 years, I've done everything right. And you didn't want me to get a car for me. You're not going to want me to get one for my son, even though the state says I'm more responsible than his mother. But here nor there, obviously I knowingly broke the rules. And yes, there was a feeling of, geez, I hope I get through these last 6 months because I don't want to deal with this anymore. But
you did it. And so all good. You get the loan, no problem. Yep. You filled out your financial report every month. Did you write that you had credit on there?
So no. So that was the next issue. So the 2 violations I had were opening the trade lines and filing a false report.
Okay. So, yep. But they didn't charge you with new criminal conduct for Title 18, 1001, correct?
Yep.
Are you
So
aware of that they could
C
have?
grade violations.
But are you aware that they could have actually charged you with a new crime?
Yes.
They told you that?
Yes.
Okay. So it's important. I want to make that point and distinction because a lot of people don't understand that. You got in one sense, my position is this is an injustice. This is an awful use of criminal justice resources to put a man in prison and destroy his job and things of that sort. And I really empathize with you. And that's one of the reasons I try to teach people, hey, understand this. When you cross that line and you fill out the report, it's one thing. That's a violation of supervised release. But if you lie on the report itself when you're submitting it and you get a bad prosecutor, they could bring charges against a person for violating what's called Title 18, Section 1001 for making a false statement. And that's new criminal conduct, which could result in a new 5-year prison term. So I'm really glad you didn't get that. I'm really sorry of what happened, but walk us through now. You said you got violated. How did you first hear this was going to be a problem? Did you go into your supervised release or what happened?
Nope. So I had never even met the lady that was my last probation officer. She just sent me an email and said, hey, I got some questions about these trade lines on your credit report. And so I knew immediately, and I didn't hide from it. I just said, yeah, they're mine.
So you said that over the phone or over an email?
Email.
And then what happened next?
It took so this was early December of last year. And then I was scheduled to be done January 10th of this year. So I was a month away. And then about December 21st or 22nd, they submitted a violation report.
How did that happen? How did you hear about it and what happened?
So she told me that she had spoke to her supervisor and they were going to violate me. And then she submitted. So
she told you that over the phone?
Nope. Everything with her was email. And
could you what you get an email? First of all, you see U.S. probation, and that immediately you say, "Oh, what is this? It just feels awful." I know what
just
that's
a bad
like.
feeling, yeah.
And you see it, and what does it say? What do those words say that you remember? We're going to violate you.
She said, after speaking with my supervisor, we've determined that we are going to violate you. We'll be submitting our request to the court.
And did you have to go get a lawyer at that point?
Nope. So I waited. I got a letter in the mail that said I've been violated. And I had my initial hearing was January 20th.
So you're January 10th, you were supposed to finish full 3 years, but instead, 10 days later, you go back before a judge.
Yeah.
Or just get the letter.
No, I got the letter, and then I was in front of the federal magistrate January 20th.
And did you have counsel with you? Not
then. Nope.
So did you talk to anybody from the time that you learned that you were going to get violated and the time that you went to court?
Nope. She told me that they would probably, if I wanted court-appointed counsel, they would do it that day.
Okay. So then you go there, and did they appoint counsel?
Yep.
And you go before the hearing, the magistrate judge, and what happened at that proceeding?
So he goes in, he reads me my charges, just like when you're charged. And then he looks it over and he asks me if I want counsel. I fill out the form. He's like, all right, I'm going to appoint you counsel. And he says, it looks like you've been living a little fast and you just aren't ready to listen to direction. And I would prepare yourself that you're probably going back.
That's what the magistrate judge said.
Yep.
And what did the lawyer tell you to expect before you had the meeting with the magistrate judge?
I didn't have an attorney yet. He let me go out that day.
You were unrepresented at that magistrate hearing.
Correct.
And so you did not think that they would put you in prison, or did you?
No.
And then the person tells you that, and you're just going, oh my God, what happened? I imagine. Right. But you have no idea how long you're going in. Is that right?
Right. Correct. Because the violation holds a 2-year max.
So the next step is they hire counsel for you, or they give you appoint counsel. Did you get it that day?
No, he called me about 3 days later from the public defender.
And when was the next thing going to be a meeting between the district court judge, or was there going to be a mini trial, or what was going to happen?
Nope. The next was basically going to be with my judge that sentenced me the first time.
And how long was it from the time that you had that initial hearing until you met with the judge?
January 20th was, and then it was February 14th. So it was 3 weeks. So
you had 3 weeks, and you were employed at the time?
Yep.
And do you own a home, or are you renting a property?
We own a home.
So because of this nonsense, they're taking effectively away the income from your family, your earnings. They're displacing your employer, and they're taking you again away from your children for no criminal conduct, only because you applied for credit, which I assume you've been paying.
Correct. Yes. No lates, no nothing.
And so now also the credit card company is also going to lose.
Yeah. So I go the 14th and in front of my judge, and that's supposed to be like he hears it and then makes his ruling. Well, at the end, he basically says he wants my probation officer to talk to my employer to see what type of employee I am, what I'm doing. He wants to know about me outside of this charge, is basically what he says. And he has a conversation with me about family, and which was the weirdest because he's never been this communicative with me. When it was sentencing, for my my first case, that was it. So we leave there, and then it just happened that my attorney was going on vacation, and then the U.S. attorney was going on vacation. So it was going to be, he wanted to meet like 2 or 3 weeks later. Well, it got pushed to March 30th. Well, then all the COVID stuff happened. So then it went from March 30th to May 8th. Then it went from May 8th to May 27th. So now it's 3.5 months later after all this. And we go back in there, and he meets with the probation officer always meets with the judge prior to going into the room. So they met before we even got to the court. And my probation officer's recommendation was 18 months extended supervised release.
Not 18 months imprisonment, 18 months. No. Okay.
Correct. Yep. And then the U.S. attorney. So first we go in there. My attorney talks on my behalf. Then he asked me if I want to say anything. And basically I just fell on the sword because my attorney advised me that my judge doesn't like it. He's heard every story in the book. So don't make up any story. Just own it, accept responsibility, and let's move forward. Which I had from the beginning that my probation officer asked me. So I said what I had to say for 30, 45 seconds. Then the prosecutor goes and he gives his, at first he's burying me. He's talking about how bad I am because I got trade lines and I'm not listening and I don't acknowledge my restitution. Meanwhile, I've never missed a payment. I shouldn't have any trade lines because I owe the government restitution. But then he says, but Mr. Teachout has a great career. He's got a family. It's not our office's intent to put somebody into prison that's not a threat to society, and we don't see Mr. Teachout as that. We would just, like to see some more supervision to make sure that he's doing okay. And then the judge basically says, yeah, that's great, but I'm going to take that 18 months and I'm going to give him 90 days incarceration.
I'm so sorry to hear that, Aaron, and particularly now in this era when we've got a social unrest and 30 or 40 million people unemployed, and they think that the appropriate response for filling out a credit report is to put you back in prison for 90 days, which is really sad. And I want people to hear this. Now, you called me asking about whether I thought it was possible for you to get home confinement instead of going in. Isn't that right?
Yeah, I had, just because I had not. So originally when my attorney asked the marshal what he thought, and he said that he thought I would just do it in county jail because it was only 90 days. Well, I got my letter, or my attorney got my letter on Thursday, and now it's a camp in Kentucky, which I guess if you're going to ask me, I'd rather be at a camp than county jail. But it was just weird. It was weird to everybody that they were going to send me back to federal prison for a 90-day sentence. So I went to research that location, and then I saw a video that you had on that talked about COVID and the Bureau of Prisons. And that was the reason supposedly that the marshal's office gave my attorney was the BOP has restricted all movement and the county jails are full because they can't push anybody from county jail to the BOP. So there's no room for you in a county jail.
Well, there's a lot of complications, and unfortunately with the judge that you have, because that judge does not seem like he has a lot of compassion. Here are your options though, Aaron. The only option that I know of is what's called a motion for compassionate release. And it's under Title it might be under Title 18, but 3582 motion. And the problem is you're not in prison right now. So right now, the judge has lost jurisdiction over you. You're now been sentenced back to the custody of the Attorney General. So you've got to do your time inside of the prison, but you could file a motion for compassionate release. The protocol for that, as you may remember from being in prison, is you've got to first of all go through administrative remedy. Do you remember those? BP8, BP9, BP10? Yep. So you're not in prison, so you can't even file that right now. You'd have to get to prison first, okay, in a normal circumstance. With COVID, things have changed. As you know, the Bureau of Prisons has been releasing some people to go to home confinement. And they've been, you may be familiar with the fella, Paul Manafort, the president's former friend, that he had like 7-year sentence and they let him go to home confinement. Are you aware of that?
I didn't know that, no.
Yeah, so you can look that up on the internet. He got to go to home confinement. Michael Cohen, the president's former lawyer, also went from prison to home confinement. And we've got a lot of people that have reached out to us that have filed these motions. And the reality is it's judge by judge. The judge has the discretion. But your judge had the discretion to keep you out from the beginning and he didn't do it.
Right.
So here are your options, is that you could try to file this on your own, or you could hire, I don't think the federal defender will do it for you, but they may, but you could hire a lawyer. My recommendation is I wouldn't do it because it's going to just be a drain on your family's resources.
Sure.
And it's you don't have a right to it. It's the discretion of the judge. But this judge already had that discretion. He already knew about COVID and he still sent you there for 90 days. So it sounds like he's a very hard-hearted man. Do you know who appointed him?
I don't. I know he's been there at least 8 years because I had him 8 years ago. Okay.
Do you have,
I'm sure I can find out.
You could do this on your own, Aaron. I think that sometimes we have to live in the world as it exists. And it sounds like you got a really bad deal, that you're going to be going in there. I just wouldn't advocate for you spending a lot of money to hire somebody because as somebody who was in jail for 26 years, I know that financial resources are really important to families. And if there was a shot, the other option is when you got to prison, you could file a 2241, which is a challenge against the prison itself for holding you unconstitutionally in light of the COVID issue, because people are dying, as you know. Right. The problem is I can look at you and see that you're a pretty healthy guy and young, and you probably
and I also know the prison system, that it would probably take them longer than 90 days to get back to me versus.
It's not the prison. If you filed this, you'd file in a federal district court. But in that case, you would, if you filed that motion, you would file in the district where you're being held. So if you're in Kentucky, you'd file at the judge there, not
versus my judge.
Compassionate release goes to your judge.
Got it.
Okay. So if you filed in Kentucky, you'd file there. And you could do this on your own, but you've got a lot of challenges because, it's not like you're some guy who's 62 that has asthma and, right? Do you have any issues?
For sure.
You don't look like, No. So it's hard to make the case. Now, there's going to be plenty of people that will want to take your money if you call them.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
My advice to you is a brother of people
who are in trouble. 90 days and go home.
Well, it's hard to say that but I've listened to you and I've thought some things. So what preparation did you make before you went to that sentencing day? Did you do anything on your own?
As far as?
Make a case to advocate for yourself? Or did you just defer to
your attorney? In the sense of every time my attorney talked to the U.S. attorney, all they were going to do was extend my probation.
But you didn't write a letter, talk about your life experiences and what your thoughts were and help the judge understand who you are and what happened?
In that February 14th, that initial hearing, him and I had about a 15-minute conversation actually from the bench about kids and family and my job. And we went through everything kind of A to Z. He asked me everything.
So the issue though may have been, or the possibility for advocacy, it really begins much earlier than that, like before you had the magistrate hearing. You know, you
Right.
could have written a document up first person that talks about who you are, what you've learned from this experience, why you did this, what thought process, accept full responsibility, you know, just really articulate out there, because their argument against you was that you haven't learned your lesson yet.
Right.
And it's your job as a defendant to figure out how to convey that message. And although I think it's a little bit late to try and do it now, in all honesty, I want you to take this lesson as you go forward, because unfortunately, you're going to have 18 more months of this nonsense.
Right.
And this judge did not give you early termination at 18 months, which he had the discretion to do, right? And you tried.
Yeah. Well, I asked them at 30 months.
Yeah, and you were a great candidate. You were a great candidate for it then. So it's really unfortunate that this happened to you. But I think that you've done a great service in helping other people understand how serious things like this are. Because you seem pretty young and capable, and I'm sure you're going to land on your feet. But as you know, most of the people that get out of prison are a little bit more fragile. And if they don't have a good job and they go away for 90 days, it's like totally can derail everything, where they get behind on their credit again and their relationships go bad. And you know, it's just harder and harder and harder. And so that's really one of the biggest problems in our nation's prison system, is that there's really no mechanism to reward a pursuit of excellence. And, you know, you had this issue, but you probably didn't know how serious it would be.
Right.
And so that's why I feel really so passionately about spreading this message to as many people as possible. And I'm going to share your story, and I appreciate you for giving it to us. I wish that I could give you better insight, but I think when you reached out and asked me, is it possible? Well, the answer is yes, it's possible. When you ask me if it's probable, now that I've heard your circumstances, I think it's very unlikely that this judge will give you relief, and I would not pay anybody a nickel to do it.
Right.
Because you know, it's like you're better off just putting it on black at Las Vegas on a roulette.
Roll it. Yeah. For sure.
But look, why don't you reach out to us again? I'm on the Prison Professor Show on YouTube.
Okay.
That's my channel, and I'd love to hear your story when you come back at the end of in the fall.
Yep.
The Bureau of Prisons does have the discretion to look at your case and let you out. And I would certainly make a move in that direction if I were you, but you can't do that till you get there.
Right.
You know, because there's two different bodies here. One is the executive branch, which is the Bureau of Prisons, and one's the judicial branch, which is the judge. So the judge doesn't seem too inclined to give you relief. The Bureau of Prisons very well may. They certainly have the discretion. You are aware of that, a letter from the Attorney General Barr that authorizes you to serve the whole time on home confinement, aren't you?
Yep.
Yeah. So the BOP may do it. They've done it. They've let a lot of people out, thousands of people out. And we've had some interactions with those people, but that's going to be an issue for you to launch while you're in custody. You can't do it really until you get there.
Sure.
So give us a call on the other side, and I wish you success. Unless you have other questions for me?
No, I'm good. October 30th. I'll let you know.
October 30th. And you got my number. So if I can help you with anything, give me a call.
Sounds good. Appreciate it.
Good luck, brother.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you're in a jail or a prison and you're watching this video, it's my hope that you take a lesson from Matt, because you really need to understand all of the terms of your supervised release. There's a checklist that seems really formulaic that you're going to fill out as soon as you get out. But if you don't really understand the severity of those, it is such close detail that it can result in you going back to prison. And if you go back to prison, think of all the complications that are going to follow. You could lose your job. Your family's going to suffer because of the massive disruption. I mean, you're just getting settled. You think everything's behind you. Then bam, you're back into the system. And that's what that roller coaster of imprisonment means. You get started. You think you're doing well. You're certainly not hanging around other people that are violating the law. You're certainly not violating the law yourself. But there are things such as a technical violation, which means you don't break the law, but you still go back to prison. In fact, that is a massive number of people that come back into the system. It's not for breaking the law. It's not for new criminal activity. It's for failing to comply with the terms of supervised release. it was a little bit different for me. I did 26 years. So I think that my probation officer was much more tolerant of me than somebody that may have served 2 years or 3 years or 4 years. I was doing all kinds of business deals when I got out of prison, getting credit, building businesses, working for myself. The truth is, though, I was really open and honest with my probation officer about everything that I was doing. And that's something else that's important. They chose to violate Matt, which in my opinion is really an egregious misuse of power and authority, because he's not a threat to society. The U.S. attorney didn't want to put him back in prison. The probation officer didn't want to put him back in prison. He doesn't need to be taken back out of society. For some reason, the judge didn't agree. The judge thought that filling out a credit application less than 1 month prior to his completing the terms of his supervised release, the judge thought it was important to send him back. And that's all that matters. The problem with that, of course, are the ancillary consequences that are going to follow for Matt. Now, I got off track there for a moment because I was going to tell you about my own journey. Oh, I know what I was going to say. So while you're on supervised release, you have to fill out these financial reports every month, and you have to be honest on there. If you fail to write on that financial report that you've gotten credit, and you did, then you are not only technically violating the conditions of supervised release, but you're also committing a new crime if you lie. It is a lie to fill out a form and be inaccurate. When it says in there, I testify under the penalty of perjury, the foregoing to be true to the best of my knowledge, or whatever it is, if you don't disclose that you filled out a credit report, but you did fill out a credit report, that is not only a violation of the terms of your supervised release, that is also new criminal activity in violation of Title 18, Section 1001, a code I'm very familiar with, which just says you lied to a federal officer. So be very cautious when you go home and you're on supervised release. Be certain that you're doing everything within your power to be truthful and be honest and open with your supervised release, your probation officer, because if you don't, you're really exposing yourself and your family to potential problems. That's why we create content for prison professors, is to try and bring you what we have learned and seen and experienced and what we've heard from others. We hope this is helpful. We hope that you continue looking into prison professors for news that will help you have the best possible experience. Thanks.